Thank you so much for joining us. My name's Loftus. I am a sports presenter. But instead of me introducing our panel, I thought, let them do it, get it from the horse's mouth. Zoe, would you like to kick us off?
Yeah, absolutely. Good afternoon, everybody. So my name's Zoe Johnson. I'm Managing Director at Brighton and Hove Albion women's team. So sort of my background in terms of business and administration, really when I first started, it was all about, I just played football when I was younger and never really thought there'd be a career path into women's football or into football in general. My aspiration was always to be an embalmer because my family owned a funeral directors, so that was what I always wanted to be. And as sort of life materialised and obviously the game started to grow a little bit, I obviously did some coaching along the way, and then I ended up falling into a building surveying career. So I was a building surveyor for 5 years, which I don't claim to be a very good one. It wasn't really where my passions was. My passion was always for football and was wanting to be involved in the sport in any way possible, really. And then obviously there become an opportunity where like salaries was never sort of big enough in the game where I could ever leave really my building surveying career to be able to come into football. But then obviously there come a point where I was really, really fortunate to be able to get a full-time job in women's football, and that sort of led me down the career then to ending up at Brighton.
Anne-Marie?
I'm sorry, you've got another northerner. I'm Anne-Marie Bradley. I am head of HR at Burnley Football Club, and my background is nowhere near as exciting as Zoe's. I just started in Burnley FC in the community. Before that, I worked in a law firm. Started in Burnley FC in the community, and then just transitioned over, so I do overarch both now. That's my job.
I'm Jana. I'm putting the German perspective on this panel. Also in this venue, it's a bit challenging. But yeah, I'm a board member of Fussball, Kann, Mehr. We are a non-profit organization that we have founded 2 years ago. Germany is always a bit laid back compared to the UK, even when it comes to women in football. And we are advocating for more women in leadership roles. And my background, and that's how I fell in love with London, is that I used to work for the Olympics and Paralympics. So I spent very long time here and managing the German houses. Maybe someone of you are all quite young, but maybe some of you have seen this place. And I used to work for the German Bundesliga as well, with 0% of other women within one room. And so changing from the Olympic Paralympic world into German soccer, it was like a shock for me in the beginning because my days started with 35 guys in a room and myself, and I'm pushing the microphone as well. So yeah, and that's how I started working with other females out of the German soccer world on advocating for more gender equality in sports, because we really think the game needs to change, and not just the women's game, specifically the men's game. And yeah, that's me.
Thanks, Jana. Hi everyone, my name's Hala Ousta and I'm Senior Diversity and Accessibility Manager at FIFA. And I think from a young age, it was always for me growing up in Scotland, I don't know if we need a translator or interpreter, but it was what team do you support instead of where you fae. And for me, it was kind of always football was my identity. And I think I'm safe enough south of the border that I can say it was Celtic Football Club. Maybe not. But yeah, it was my love for football, and it was also coming from a Middle Eastern heritage background, was always kind of conscious aware of equalities and human rights and different things. So growing up, I know I wanted to do something in those areas. And I think I was really lucky, I had a supportive family in terms of that I didn't realise that I wasn't white Scottish until I was a lot older, and that there was never such a thing as a glass ceiling. And if I think about all the different minority aspects in terms of, okay, women, okay, Arab, okay, Muslim, okay, this, that, then I would have put a concrete ceiling up there if that's the way I was thinking. So really just in terms of if I wanted something, if I really enjoyed it, which was football and equalities, that's what I wanted to do. Yeah, that's great if you love it, but when I was younger in terms of opportunities, that didn't exist. When I graduated from university, diversity and inclusion, equality, discrimination in football didn't exist. So I had to go into a different element in terms of policy development, housing, not interested at all. And then the Scottish Football Association advertised for football equity officers, and that was mine. That was mine. There was no chance anyone else was going to get that. So I was really lucky. Started off with football development in terms of ethnic minority participation within football, so really grassroots participation. And from there, I also studied in terms of diversity and inclusion. It was the time of the Equalities Act. So I was able to kind of do the employment, the human resources aspect, the policy development, going back to that a little bit from internal. And then now on to FIFA in terms of that was my pinnacle. That's where I wanted to be. That's where I could really like push things, the buzz of the events and the World Cup and the Women's World Cup and the youth and the beach soccer and all those different things. So again, that's a different element of inclusion and participation. It's more in terms of accessibility for disabled people, people with limited mobility, as spectators, as workforce coming to our events, and how to get them involved in all different aspects. So a bit of different types of inclusion and accessibility on that front.
See, that introduction was way better than what I was doing. So yeah, really appreciate that, guys. Let's start on a positive one. Where do you think the main opportunities for women to work in the game currently are?
In my opinion, it really depends in terms of what you're interested in. Is it local level, regional level, national level, international level? There's opportunities across the game as a whole. And of course, yeah, we understand that there's the on the pitch elements, but the off the pitch elements are so huge and so vast. In terms of when we look at, for example, where I work at FIFA, international events, there's over different functional areas. You can work in accounting, in logistics, in media, in communications, in human rights, in promotions, in commercial partnerships. It's huge, so you don't really need to be an expert in football. It helps if you love it because you enjoy the buzz and you enjoy the work, but you could really come from any background, have studied anything, and still find your place. So it really depends in terms of what you're interested in.
I feel like that's gone far and wide, but like almost tunnel vision, football clubs. Anne-Marie, what was your journey like to working at Burnley?
So I started off as a PA to an FD in a legal firm. Charlotte, who does all legal now, she's like, really? You've no clue now. And the FD at the time, female leader, really strong. She just said, I think you're really good with people, why don't you go through your HR qualifications? So I did that. So I had 3 young boys at the time and 1 car and not very much money. And my husband used to take me to college on a weeknight and pick me back up with lads in the pyjamas and things like that. And then I got to a point where I'd been in the law firm 10 years and I was just ready for a change. Job came up at Burnley FC in the community. I'm a Burnley fan. My husband said, perfect job for you. Went there, did 3 years there, set up the HR function there because I never had a HR function. And then we had a CEO who was in the charity at the time who then moved over to the club just before the present owners took over. And he said, look, they've never had HR in Burnley Football Club. Can you come over and sort it out? And then I've been there 3 years and I'm still sane-ish. But it's getting there. Charlotte will tell you, it's getting there.
Jana, I know it's different in Germany, so I'll be interested to hear the other takes. But what are the main barriers for women in football?
I think the main barriers, there are 3. One is the glass ceiling. Secondly, I guess it's the old-fashioned style of recruiting. And the third thing is that you need to approach women in a different way than you approach maybe men on recruiting things. And coming back to the first thing, that's what we do with Fussball Kann Mehr as well, is this glass ceiling, specifically in football clubs, it's there. And it's so tough for women working in the clubs to get through this. So what we are doing is we are working with clubs on setting up their diversity strategy. We are consulting them. And one of our requirements to work with a club is that they need to have the top management commitment. We always say, like, the changes are bottom up, it's always good and it needs to be there. But top down, it needs to be there as well. Otherwise, there's no change. So we are working with all of the board members or the general managers on setting up and implementing their strategy, but then also supporting the women who are in the club and who actually want to take more responsibility, to encourage them to do this, but also setting the structure. So it's like a two-way street, I would say. And that's how we approach it. And when I speak about the second thing, the old-fashioned style of recruiting, I think specifically in football, and that's completely different in the corporate world in Germany, the recruitment is always taking place through existing networks. But these are boys' clubs mainly, so they are recruiting also the other boys because their network is established 10, 15, 20 years ago, and there are none women. So how could they have a professional network with women if there are none? So therefore, we are also consulting them and supporting them in creating this network, making women visible, also with a conference that we are now hosting during the Euro on gender equality and diversity overall in Germany. And the third thing is that I would say when you are not promoting women within your whole organization, you are always like not giving them the chance to develop, and if you're not making them visible, we are not creating any change. So that's another thing where we are working with the clubs to really make these women visible.
Do you feel like the tide's changing? Do you feel like from where you were to where you are now, can you see like a tangible difference?
Yeah, we can see change, but it's too slow. It's absolutely too slow. And that also has something to do that there are no, like compared to the corporate world, there are rules and regulations, there are laws that they need to fulfill. If you look specifically in listed companies, they need to, there are quotas that they need to fulfill, and we don't have this in football, and therefore the changes are just too slow. And for us, therefore, it's so important also to connect with others to really push through this, and that's why we are also working with women in football and with the US and with Australia, with the two organizations. They are also promoting more diversity in the football industry to create a global alliance and to push even more that we are changing the game together.
We spoke about Germany being a few years behind the UK. Do you guys think that the same barriers are still popping up in our game and on our side of things?
You mean here in the UK?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyone?
Maybe that's.
I've seen like some
for
nods.
the
I don't see any barriers. I don't see any barriers for us. I don't know whether I'm just absolutely oblivious to what goes on, but no, because we have more females in the first team setup than we've ever had. And I think it does start from the ownership, because I do feel like our owners are much more open to females in on the first team, and obviously we've got a first team manager who embraces that as well, so that always helps. But I don't see many barriers, because for me, I just never have in football.
Maybe to add here a couple of numbers. In Germany, for an example, we have in 150 leading positions in Bundesliga and Bundesliga 2, there are 4 women. And none of these 4 women is leading the club. So it's 3% overall. So that really shows also in numbers. When I look at the UK, I'm always like going like, oh yes, there are these great ladies. And we should get some as well, but we just don't have any. Yeah. So we still have to go through all of these barriers. Yeah. And also to gain this experience and exchange, and how you have done it and how you have developed, that's very important for us also. Also for our clubs, so we are working with Eintracht Frankfurt, VfB Stuttgart, Werder Bremen, all of these big traditional clubs. And they need to also get in touch with people who have done it, show these best cases and see how they can develop and how they can create a more diverse field, and in the end create better results.
I think, Liam, as well, there can sometimes be a little bit of a fear amongst, like, when you're a female member of staff, that you've got to juggle life, children, and you're coming into a football environment. I think everybody that works in, whether it's in the men's game, the women's game, or whatever it might be in football, we know that it's not the most glamorous lifestyle in terms of you can be working sometimes 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So I think sometimes also the fear of an opportunity of wanting to put yourself forward, thinking, oh, can I actually go and juggle that sort of lifestyle? I've got young families, or I've got to juggle other things in my life as well, because that can sometimes be an added pressure. So I think these sort of events that women in football are putting on are absolutely great, and I think over the last sort of 2 or 3 years, everyone can see there's a lot more females getting involved in the game, both in the men's, boys, women's and girls game, which is great. But I think sometimes it's just about being really confident to put yourself forward, to actually think, I have the credentials to go and do that, but also I can juggle this around other things that are going on in my life as well, because there's a lot of really inclusive clubs out there that would be really, really good at sort of supporting family life as well.
So please talk to us about your role at Brighton. I'm interested. What's your day-to-day? What does it entail?
Yeah, so it can vary from a variety of things, really, from dealing with problems that might be going on with staff on the pitch, dealing with long-term strategy, sort of reporting back on the women's and girls strategy, dealing with the sort of day-to-day operations that need to go on. And I think ultimately my job's to make sure that I strive forward on the club's vision and strategy, report back to the CEO and the board on that, and ultimately just make sure that we're trying to move forward and progress the game as much as we can, and make sure that the environment that we're in is the best possible environment for both the staff and the players to be able to succeed. Absolutely.
This one's for yourself and for Anne-Marie. What advice would you give to someone wanting to work in a football club? What would be their first step sort of thing?
So from my experience, is just take the opportunities and don't think that you can't do something. Just do it and then figure it out later is what I think. For example, we do internships at Burnley Football Club where we've kept on female staff from the sports science side, from the academy side. We've got this project called the Hive where we just anybody can get on that, and it's just a mentoring programme for a season long, and we take on 30 mentees, people across the club mentor them, and they come in for insight days. So it's just and you know, they're not coming in and being paid for that, but it's just using that opportunity, because we have got 2 Hivers now working for us. Now our internships are paid internships and they go through the same recruitment process like anything else, but I think you've got to work hard, and I know it's a cliche, but it is. You just got to work hard and just don't expect the opportunities to come to you. If you see the opportunity, just go for it. And because I've seen loads of people come through on just taking a different route rather than just applying for a job.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Is it like get yourself in the door and then once you're there, then you can pivot and change and decide what you like doing, or is it almost this is what I want to do? This is my level, and that's all it is. The
thing is with football club, at the end of the day, it's just a business, isn't it? It's just run like a business. So I don't really see it as, oh, you can't work there because you're a female. There's going to be jobs across the club. Like I've got colleagues in here all female colleagues in here. Like Charlotte works for us at Walker Morris. She does all legals. We've got colleagues in here from the charity. And you know, there's loads of different jobs, and it's not just, you know, with the first team, which everyone thinks is really glamorous, but it's actually really not. It's really boring. It's really time consuming. It's like you've got to have all your weekends are taken up. Players are just another humans, aren't they? But just a bit more needier. So like, you're better off in the business side of the club than you are on the first team, which everyone says is the glamorous bit, but they don't really have a lot of free time.
Hala, how can we make football more diverse, like in terms of employment?
I think it's a couple of approaches. There's no one quick fix answer. Probably going back to my time at the Scottish FA, when we were trying to increase participation of ethnic minorities within football, it was a lot of education and awareness and perceptions of barriers rather than actual barriers existing. So what we did was awareness and education for the association or for clubs themselves, to let them know that these are certain considerations or certain perceptions from these different communities. And we can say communities, or we can change that into the gender perspective and say these are things that we have to look into, understand. And for example, within FIFA, we have different networks, and I lead the women's network. And one of those things that we did, for example, for International Women's Day is, yeah, you can inspire women, talk about the case studies, promote, but also what's going to help them to succeed in their roles. What are the tangible things that you can offer to support? And what we did was we talked about perimenopause and menopause awareness for International Women's Day. And what does that mean in terms of for staff and not just for women themselves? And I think there's certain topics that we go through as women that as ourselves as women don't understand or know about yet, are not informed about, but also the men that work with us. So for example, if you are a manager, you're a line manager and you're working with somebody who is going through menopause, perimenopause, you know what considerations to take account of, you can have those conversations. So it's really an education piece, and that can be applied to any topic at all. And in the same respect, it's that element of the communities themselves and those perceptions of barriers. It's an education for them and an awareness for them. Why are we not getting trials for the big top teams? Well, there's actually a whole structure that you have to go through, and it's the same in terms of employment for women as well. Why are we not getting those jobs? Those jobs, there's a glass ceiling, we can't get to them. Well, do you know the ways to get into the club, to get into the roles? I mean, we talk about football as a village, but football's also huge, and there's so many different types of opportunities. So have you tried? Do you know? And you asked, well, is there one way to get into football? Do you need to know exactly what you want and how to get it and how to get in? That helps a lot. I think over the past 2 weeks, I've had introduction meetings with and mentoring different women who want to get into the game, and you ask them, well, what is it you want to do? Well, I'm not sure yet. There's X, there's Y, there's Z. It really helps to know what you want, because then I can direct you to the right person, the right department, and I can direct you to the right person within the village that can open the door for you to get you into that element.
Getting into football is one thing, but what's it like in terms of progression? Do you feel there's more barriers being a female in football, trying to get through the system almost?
For myself, personally, there wasn't, because I think I knew what I wanted to do, and I knew that I was interested in it, and it was something I enjoyed doing. And in terms of the networks, it really helped. What happened early on in my career, I was very lucky. I was on the board of Women in Football at a certain point in my career. I was very young, very naive still. I went in terms of one of the leadership programs that they were on, and it was Ebru who had said to me, well, what is it you want to do next? And I knew what I wanted to do, but my line manager didn't, and I can't expect them to be a mind reader and advocate on my career for me. So I had to really understand, well, there's an opportunity opening up here. I want it, I need it, can you help me to get there? And really just being vocal about what you want and speaking to people about what you want, because nobody is going to come and be proactive and give it to you. You have to advocate for yourself and work towards that yourself, and have the support of others to help you get there.
Zoe, we know Paul Barber is extremely supportive of the women's game. How integrated is the women's team with the men's team? Is there one club vision?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for anyone in this room that knows Paul, Paul's obviously an absolute credit to the game in general, but I think especially to women's football. Not only does he sort of strive women in football to continue their careers in that, but he's also passionate about our women's team. I think a lot of clubs in women's football speak about being sort of one club and sort of training in the similar facilities and things like that, but I think Brighton really epitomises what that means. We have at our training facility, we're all on one training ground, but we don't just have EPC, we have EPC 1 and EPC 2, it's not known as the men's and the women's building, and that's like a cultural thing to try and break down those barriers and make sure that we sort of use each other's meeting rooms, make sure that we're integrated at lunchtime so that we've got relationships. Like obviously we've had been through a period of a change in head coach, and it's been really good that we've been able to bring in somebody over from the boys' academy, and he's not needed time to settle in because he already knows all the members of staff, and I think that shows when there's real true integration across the football club. And I think with that as well, like myself in my role at the club, I sit on the executive committee, which all the people that are in senior positions and sort of head their departments up sit on, and we meet once a week. And it's an opportunity, Paul chairs the meeting, and it's an opportunity for us to all share what's happening in all of our areas. And I think that's really useful, because it's not everybody in every senior position across the club knows exactly what's happening in women's and girls. Every week they know exactly what's happened, the good, the bad, the ugly, whatever it might be. They're there, they're aware of it, and they're across it. And I think that, and everyone really has a genuine care and passion for that. So I think that's when you can really say that you're one club, when you've got a leader at the top in Paul that really is passionate about that and sort of leads the rest of his team. And there's nobody in the football club in any position that wouldn't know what's going on in the women's and girls department. So I think that's, it's a credit to the club itself.
Outside of education and work experience, what would you guys say are the biggest recommendations or tools for someone trying to develop and prepare themselves for the football industry? We've made eye contact now.
I think it's networking, networking, and networking. So actually you have all done a great job by coming here. So it's really important to build these networks and also then create allyship. I think specifically when you enter into the industry or when you are quite young at the beginning of your career path, it's so important that you have someone who supports you within the organization, specifically when you are the only woman in the room. I think you should then speak to the men and ask them so that you are not, in the end, the women's opinion. Because that tends to happen, and we would do it the other way around, this in the same direction. If there's just one man and we are 10 women in the room, it's just the men's opinion. So it's not, that's a bias we all do have, and I think there you really need these allyship, and then when you are a bit further up in your career, support others, support other women. If you get asked, there is a job opening, do you have some recommendations? Recommend women, recommend women, recommend women. Employ them and get them started and support them within their function, because it's so important really that we also support each other.
Perfect. We still have a bit of time. Has anyone got any questions for the panel? His hand's going to stay down. Come on. Come on. Perfect, up front.
So it's probably a question for Zoe. I'm from Francesca from Man United.
Sorry.
Hi, I'm Francesca from Man United. A question for Zoe, I think probably. When you sort of think about, it's more sort of positions in football in general rather than sort of women working in the sport, but I'm thinking about the jobs that are dedicated to women's teams, you know, women's professional teams and men's teams within clubs. Do you think it's better to have sort of dedicated people working with the women's team, or do you think is it better to have, you know, a commercial team that worked on men's and women's? Or I'm just, because I think, you know, sometimes in clubs there's sort of, oh, you do media, you do that for the men's and the women's teams, but then obviously there's benefits from that if, you know, if sponsors are looking at the men's team, they also get to look at the women's team. But then I also wonder if it's better to have sort of dedicated people focused on the women's side as well. So I just wondered what your thoughts were on that.
I think I've been at clubs where I've experienced both, and I think at Brighton, I think my opinion now since working at Brighton would slightly have changed. And I think one thing that at Brighton we do really well is all the heads of departments oversee every area. So for example, our head of player care oversees player care for the whole football club. So then within the areas you'll have a player care in the boys academy, player care in the girls academy, and the women's first team. He oversees the whole of that. So the strategies align, the processes are aligned. So there's definitely strengths in that. But then I think there's also specific expertise in your area that you need to be able to lead in your area. So there's also a pro to that. But I think you can still have, we still have designated staff within each of those departments, but then we have a senior leader that is an expert in that area that can give them more day-to-day support than what I would be able to give them. So I've used the player care again as an example. I wouldn't be able to sort of necessarily give them some of the expertise on that when it's their area, so it helps. The same in the medical space. I'm not a medic, so I won't be able to necessarily help them in certain areas, but having someone who's head of medical above that oversees the whole medical strategy for the whole football club really helps. So I think there's pros and cons to both, definitely. But working within the model that I currently work in at Brighton, I think it only adds value to the programme and it'll only help strive us to be better in the future and have a more elite environment.
Ours is exactly the same as that. And it's good for knowledge sharing as well, because you do find that in the men's first team setup they are probably a bit more experienced. So then they can share their knowledge with the academy staff, you know, with the female staff, the women's team staff, and with the commercial. What we do when we're getting commercial deals, they're always looking at it from men's first team lens, women's first team lens, and they even look for the charity as well, if they can fit in, if they can get something for the charity as well. So ours is very similar setup to that.
Yeah, and I think one thing just on the back of that, you're saying, I think over a period of time, it's naturally that the women's and girls department have picked from the men's and boys academies, because that's something that's been in place for a lot longer than what the women's game has, but we've noticed over a short period of time when we've had crossover in staff coming over to work in our department or over in the men's side, that actually there's really good practices and processes that are in EPC2, which is where our women's and girls are situated, that they can take good practices and processes that we have and take them back to the men's first team and the boys' academy. So it definitely works both ways, and I think historically it always has been that way, where the staff are obviously, the game's been going for a lot longer, they're a lot more experienced, like they've been around the block for a lot longer. But now I think naturally as the women's game grows and the more that keeps happening, there's definitely going to be learnings from that way as well. So I think that integration across clubs and alignment of processes is really important.
Any more questions? Was that a hand or was that a scratching of the nose? I don't know. No? Okay, well, thank you very much for joining us, and thank you to the panel. Don't shoot off because Emma Hayes is coming up. But yeah, thank you so much. We'll see you around.